Let's get going with our first question this week, Jimmy. It's from Sean Delaney. Greetings from the Evansville area. The subject of
Greetings.
Greetings and salutations, Sean. The subject of why Tommy Rich sort of stalled out as a top guy came up on a message board lately. The usual argument of the Sawyer feud cooling him off was discussed, but it also came up that Black Saturday happened around the time he was doing the new Fabulous Ones, as well as Crockett getting the TBS spot from Vince. When the new Fabs run ended, I believe Rich went to Continental, then Memphis, before turning up in WCW around 1989. While Mid-Atlantic was packed, does Jimmy...
Jesus Christ, what is this, his Wikipedia page?
Does Jimmy have any thoughts on why they never brought back, one of the biggest TBS created stars prior to Turner buying out the Crockett's?
Tommy, it didn't so much fade as a top attraction as much as the territories that he worked in faded as top territories. Or maybe a little combination of the two. The whole thing with Buzz was hot in 1983, but that was a horrible year for wrestling in Atlanta, for the Atlanta office. And 84 would be obviously worse, as they would be effectively closed up and Ole would have to restart from scratch with early time slot, blah, blah, blah. And when Tommy was in Memphis at the time, of the new Fabs, that did not work out. People weren't going to take new Fabs. They wanted their old Fabs or no Fabs. So it wasn't a reflection on Tommy or Eddie, either one, except that it just was not going to work. And then when he went to Continental, I think Continental pretty much in the mid-'80s was starting to experience the downturn. And at the same time, Tommy had been wild in his wildfire days. Somebody said something about fired up and wrecked with some rental cars. And I don't know that Crockett was a fan of his or would have wanted him in his territory, given him his propensity in Atlanta and points north for wrecking rental cars and potentially being wildfire. So there was not many places for him to work to be a top attraction because there was no top attractions in a lot of places he was working.
I mean, you talk about Crockett may not have wanted it. Do you think Dusty would have played a role in not wanting someone who had been so over and such a major star in the early days of cable television working in the same company as him?
No, by 1986 or 1987, Tommy Rich was not going to get over Dusty Rhodes on any platform in the known universe.
No, but 1985.
He might be stretching it there. And 84 might be a stretch too. Maybe it was both.
Tommy, the spring and summer of 84, the new Fabulous Ones with Eddie Gilbert. It's a weird thing for me because, like you said, no one's going to get over better than the first Fabs. And those were two mid-card guys repackaged, the greatest repackaging in the history of wrestling. And they came out of it major main event stars, major drawing cards in that area. Of course, you attach Jackie Fargo to him and it does magic things, but it didn't work that second time. And obviously there's a lot of reasons why, but I always thought it was weird that
new Coke, fake Diesel, do we need to go on?
But I always thought it was weird that you had Steve and Stan who weren't major stars yet and it worked. And then with the new Fabs, you had Eddie, who, although he had grown up in that area, was the same kind of role as Steve and Stan. He was middle of the card at best. But Tommy had been a major star. It was weird repackaging him.
Whoa, cowboy. Two things. Number one, Tommy and Eddie physically, neither one looked like Stan and Steve, just right off the bat. They weren't out there wearing Speedos, and that was a large percentage of the fucking game. It was a large part of the package, so to speak. But secondly, even with the Fargo, they didn't look like Jackie Fargo would have wanted him to ride in the car with him, much less been in the fucking limo. They're just two different kind of people than Stan and Steve, the people's vision of the Fabulous Ones. It just did not work on the face of it. And I got to be honest with Tommy Rich as a heel after the mid-'80s, I think could have gotten over somewhere that he had grown out of the whole idea of that doe-eyed, young, teeny bopper idol, grinning, sympathetic. Oh, they're beating him up because, I mean, he'd bled in front of people to the point where they thought he should have fucking died, and it didn't kill him, right? So some of the bloom was off the rose, and he had scars on his head, and he was a little fleshier, a little doughier in 1984 than he was in 1979. But his work, and when he worked for me in Smoky Mountain, his work was still great. And he was a great heel. You couldn't buy him as I think part of it was, even Leif Garrett lost his fucking hair. Folks, at some point, the really hot teen idol can't be hot 10 years later. That hot.
Yeah, I mean, great example is that night in Louisville, the famous last riot at the Louisville Gardens that me and the rest of the Smoky Mountain family caused. But it happened during that 10-man cage match when all of the heels handcuffed the baby faces to the cage and were beating the shit out of Tommy Richards in the middle of the ring. We've all seen him do it a million times, and the blood is just coming out of his head. They stopped paying attention to that, and they all turned their attention to us. So I kind of understand that argument there. And I mean, he's one of the biggest stars in the Leif Garrett comparison actually really is good, I think.
We'll see. That's why they pay us the big bucks here on Corny's drive-through.
Well,
have your money out when you pull up to the window, motherfuckers.